parked here. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiny Tim, and I'm an alcoholic. Thought that'd be very appropriate. It's really good to be here, and I want to thank everybody, the committee, and Elizabeth especially. You've been very, very diligent. And Dwayne and everybody on the committee. It's been a wonderful, energetic weekend. I love the energy in Alcoholics Anonymous, and maybe a little sleepy up here today. I ended up staying up pretty late last night watching my Cardinals lose in 5 overtimes. And I know that's really tearing you guys up. I know you're going to shed some tears about that. But it is good to be here, and the speakers have been absolutely incredible. You know, just incredible. I missed the first couple, but then some of my favorite people were here, and I just love it. And my friend Lily, it's always good to see her with that she's fully clothed. You know, you can relapse any time with that stuff, you know. And again, you know, thank everybody, and it is good to be here. You know, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I can certainly tell you that right off the bat, and I just love the diversity. I love the life I have today. I love being able to go everywhere, and you know, I sit and I think, you know, this whole thing with my Achilles tendon. You know, this is absolutely the truth, and you'll understand this. The end of 2012, I was just running like crazy. I had 6 AA commitments in a row, and work was busy, and I was traveling, and Christmas time came up, and I was just going, you know, 50, 100 miles an hour. And I actually got down on my knees one day and said, God, you have got to find a way to slow me down in 2013. Not like this! Be careful what you pray for, as they say. But anyway, I love AA. I love everything about it, because when I got here April 12th of 1990, my world had gotten really small. In fact, it was down to me, and if you weren't me, then I didn't want anything to do with you, and you didn't want anything to do with me. And today, here I am, Syracuse, New York, and little kid from a little town in the west end of Louisville, Kentucky. And I don't know how that happens, but through the grace of God and a very, very loving God. You know, and that's one of the things I do like to always talk about on Sunday morning. I don't know much about this whole thing about spirituality. What I can tell you is for the last 22 and a half years, I've kind of fallen uphill on my faith, right? And that's about as spiritual as it ever gets for me. But, you know, I think that's the deal with AA, huh? Someday they wrote a book, or somebody wrote a book one time called The Spirituality of Imperfection. And they were talking about AA because, you know, what we do here is we share our wounds. And I heard a guy say one time that God enters through the wound in all of us, and that's the way it happens. You know, only in AA do we get up here. I heard, you remember Joe and Charlie, the Joe and Charlie tapes? I heard Joe McQueenie tell a story one time. He said he was in a hotel just like this. There was a big AA conference going on. But he was walking down the hall behind 2 women who weren't with the AA conference, and he overheard their conversation. And one woman says to the other woman, well, what are they doing there anyway? And the other lady said, oh, it's awful. She said, I peeked in there the other night, and one of them gets up there and tells all these awful things about himself, and the rest of them laugh at him. You know? Where else in the world does that happen, you know? But I love it, you know, because, you know, from all walks of life, you know, Paul was talking about that the other night, you know, what a deal that we have here. I think something happens here that doesn't happen anywhere in the world. I think history will look back on Alcoholics Anonymous as the greatest love story in the history of mankind. Because when you think about it, the good as it ever gets for any of us is one drunk helping another drunk. The less broken helping the more broken at any given time. And the interesting part about that is sometimes I'm the less broken and sometimes I'm the more broken. And it really doesn't matter how long I've been in AA, you know. And the bottom line is I love AA because of all the people I know today. I want to tell you about my home group. It's the Lambton Street group. It's in the inner city in downtown Louisville. And as a direct result of, it's in the hood. It is down in the hood. And as a direct result of my home group being down in the hood, probably about 75% of the guys I sponsor are African-American men or black men. I don't really think a lot about it. That's just where I hang out. Tell you a story. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was down in the hood, about 3 blocks from my home group. There was a street that they had down there. They changed from a one-way street to a two-way street. So one day I'm going down there to get on the expressway, And right as I get ready to go, pow, I get hit right in the rear end. And I get out, and the man that hit me was an elderly black man and his wife. And so we're standing in the middle of the street waiting for the police to come. Now keep in mind, I'm only 3 blocks from my home group. We're standing there waiting for the police, and about that time, here come 2 guys down this side of the street, both black men. They run over to me to go, "Hey, Tim, you all right, buddy? You okay?" I go, "Yeah, guys, I'm all right. Go ahead." About that time, 2 guys came down the other side of the street, both black. They run over to me and said, "Tim, are you all right?" About that time, car came off the expressway. 5 guys in there, all black men. They stopped the car and said, "Tim, are you hurt? Can we take you anywhere?" And I said, "Oh, guys, go ahead." And I didn't think anything about it. I turned around, that elderly black man that hit me was standing there. He went, "Who are you anyway?" What can I tell that guy, right? I'm just a drunk, We are people who normally would not mix, but what grows up amongst us is a fellowship that's indescribably wonderful. Tell you one other story. I was about 5 years sober, and I hadn't spoken outside of Louisville. My sponsor sent me to Cherokee, North Carolina, to speak at a Cherokee Indian reservation, a Native American deal. And I go down there, and I'm real nervous because I haven't spoken anywhere outside Louisville. And I get there, and I'm the only non-Native, American speaker. And I do not look like an Indian, So I get up there to speak, and I'm really nervous. And I look out there, there's the chief sitting there, and there's like the shaman guy sitting here. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm so nervous. But the next thing I hear coming out of my mouth is, "Hey, you guys, you know what? When I was a kid, I used to watch those Cowboys and Indians movies. I pulled for the Indians. I swear I did." And the chief started to laugh a little bit, and I thought, well, maybe I'm okay here. And after the meeting, he came up to me, the chief did, and said, "Hey, boy, we was kind of worried about you, but when you got up there and told those lies, we knew you was in the right place." Oh, brother. You gotta love AA, man. You gotta love it. A lot of new people here last night. That's really exciting stuff, and I hope they all come back. Sometimes I see those young kids coming here, and I'm just asking myself, Willie Stick, how many of them will come back? And I don't know the answer to that, but the good news is they've been exposed to something very special. But let me tell you, when I was new and I showed up here, if anybody's new out there, what I did when I was sitting where you are and you were listening to the speaker, what I did, I would listen to what the speaker did that I didn't do. I was all about that. I'd be sitting out there thinking, well, I did that, and I did that. I did not do that, Next night, next speaker, did it, did not do that, Because I'm thinking I get enough didn'ts, I am out of here, And I go to a meeting one night, a lady is speaking, and I listened to this woman's story, and everything she did, I did. I'm sitting there going, man, I did that, I'm screwed, I did that too. But right at the end of her talk, she said she used to carry a half pint in her bra. I said, I did not do that. I told some old guy about it after the meeting. He said, sounds like you're getting a little desperate there to me, kid. And the deal was, I was kind of looking to see what an alcoholic looked like. And you guys said, well, looks like you. And I said, no, you know what I mean? Dirty old man in a raincoat. And you know what? I looked around. There were no dirty old men in raincoats. I don't see any raincoats here anyway. I don't see any dirty old men in raincoats here today. But the bottom line was I saw all kind of people. Some dressed well, and men, women, and having a good time, and all different. And I listened to your stories, and all kind of different stories, right? Crazy stories. But here's what happened to me finally. I kept coming back, kept listening to your stories, and here's what I noticed. Sooner or later, you all were talking about 3 things. You were talking about being restless, irritable, and discontented. You were talking about being apart from, not a part of, and you were talking about progressive patterns of dishonesty in your life. And I went, whoa, if that's got anything to do with what's wrong with me, I am screwed, because those 3 things have been part of my life from the get-go, Restless, irritable, and discontent. Our book talks about it. What is it? I don't know. I just got it, Wake up with it. I've had it since I was 13 years old, and Paul or somebody was talking about it, or Lily, that hole in your gut that the wind blows through, the whatever, the stone in your shoe. I mean, I know exactly what that is, man. And I think if you're an alcoholic of my variety, you know what it is. Because when I found alcohol when I was 13 years old, put alcohol in it, took it away. And I never forgot that. In the next 27 years, I chased that, whatever you want to call it, with alcohol. And I came here and you guys said, Tim, we're going to suggest a new way for that. We're going to hook you up with the power greater than yourself. This whole business of apart from, not a part of. I don't know what that's about, but I can tell you that there's a huge part of me, still 22 and a half years sober, that always wants to separate from the pack. There's a little part of me that always wants to be different. There's a little part of me, as much as I've done this, okay, flying up here to Syracuse, I'll get about halfway and that little voice will go, Tim, they'll know you're not one of them. They'll know you're from Kentucky, buddy. And that little voice is, I got to pay attention, because that's the voice that can take me right out of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the voice that someday wants to tell me I'm just different enough from you guys that I'll separate from the pack, There's a part from, not a part of. I have 8 grandkids today, and I love to watch old movies with them. My favorite movie of all time is E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And the reason it is back in the 80s, when that movie came out, I was all drunked up one night with some woman that I think I was engaged to, one of those deals. And but anyway, if you remember that movie, there was a part in the movie where E.T., the little Martian guy, gets all green and gray and crinkly, and he's dying. He's dying, but he looks up into the sky. All of a sudden, he goes, home, home, E.T., home. Man, I'm sitting there, tears are just coming down my face. And this girl I was with said, what is wrong with you? I said, I know just how he feels. And you know what? I could still tell that same story in church. Nobody gets it. You tell that in an AA meeting, you'll go, oh yeah, man. I've been trying to get home my whole life. And I say that because our book clearly says we have a spiritual malady. We have a physical allergy and a mental obsession, but we have a spiritual disease. Something deep down inside me had been messed up a long time, and I was trying to get home. And alcohol was my first way that tried to connect me to what I thought was the journey to where I wanted to go, The last thing you all were talking about was progressive patterns of dishonesty in your life. And when I heard that, I'm like, whoa, because, I was the type of guy that I lied when the truth was good enough. As a kid, I can remember as a kid, if I scored 20 points in a game, you say, how many points you score? I'd say 24, God, B on the test, what'd you get, Tim? B plus, I always added to the truth. And I can remember as a kid thinking, Tim, why do you do that? Why isn't the truth good enough for you? You know what I intuitively believe today? I really believe if you're an alcoholic of my kind, you almost intuitively know real early on that you cannot live in the truth. Somehow you're going to have to live outside the truth if you're going to drink the way I wanted to drink, and that's the way it went. I was about 3 months sober. I was home with my family again, and my 13-year-old daughter and I were up watching The Late Show. Now, she can't sleep because she's 13. I can't sleep because I'm 3 months sober. She says to me at 1:45 in the morning, Dad, can I order a pizza? And I said, oh, honey, you better not. Your mother will go crazy. She said, oh, come on, let me. I said, all right, go ahead. So she orders a pizza about 1:15 in the morning. Doorbell rings. It's a pizza man. Of course, her mother comes flying out of the bedroom, starts screaming at my daughter, what hell are you doing getting a pizza at 1:15 in the morning? My daughter said, well, Dad said I could. My wife said, you say she could? I said, nope. My daughter said, Dad, you're lying. I said, I know what I do it all the time. Oh, man. And I say all that to say this. Restless, irritable, and discontent. Apart from, not a part of, and progressive patterns of dishonesty in my life. See, what I know today that I didn't know when I showed up here, what I just described is the spiritual malady called alcoholism and everything that goes with it. Body, mind, and spirit. Apart from, restless, irritable, and discontent, and you guys said, Tim, that's your spiritual darkness. And instead of drinking alcohol or mood-altering substances, we're going to hook you up with a power greater than yourself. Apart from, not a part of, we're going to give you the great fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And all you got to do is drag your raggedy old butt in here every day. And Tim, this thing about lying, we're going to give you the 12 steps. And if you'll do those steps, you'll find your truth. You'll be able to accept your truth and live in your truth, and you'll be able to stay sober, you know. And I say that, and I said this yesterday in this little meeting we had, because that is the disease of alcoholism, and it has a total cure that are included in those three things. And I think so many times today we're shortchanging people by letting them sit around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous way too long, just telling them not to drink. Because my problem was, I had stopped drinking many, many times. My problem was I always started again. But I don't know why we're fooling people anymore, because our book clearly tells us, you know, that we got 12 steps, not 3 1/3. As a lot of people tend to want to practice. And let's tell them right off the bat that you need to get about the business of doing the deal, because if you don't do the deal and you're an alcoholic of my variety, then you're not going to make it. And I just say that today because we were talking yesterday about getting hung up on the first 3 steps and the last part of the 12th step. And I think that happens in just a whole lot of places. You know, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. It wasn't if you were going to drink, it was when and how good were you going to do it, you know. Interestingly enough, we had no alcoholics in my family, Lily, until me. Hard to believe. I mean, we had all kind of drinking for generations. And I figured out one time in my family, we had two groups in my family. We had characters and we had nervous people. You know, had a lot of those guys, man. No alcoholics. And the truth is, as you're probably guessing, you know, people were dying of the disease of alcoholism on both sides of my family, you know, for many, many years, you know. Just the way it was. Just the way it was. What I'll tell you, and I think, again, I heard Paul talk about this, and if you're new, I'll just tell you right off the bat what I know today about my disease. From when I was 18 years old on, it started to take from me everything that would ever mean anything to me. And I say it that way because there was a time in my life I didn't care what it took for you, but I always really cared what it took for me. Because as an 18-year-old kid, I had hopes, I had dreams, I had aspirations. You know, I wanted to be something. You know, I wasn't just a nobody. I wanted to be something in life. And the first gift God had given me, and it's kind of apropos this time, I was a good athlete, and I was a good basketball player. And in the state of Kentucky, if you can shoot a ball through a hoop, that's a good deal down there. And I was an all-state player. My picture was in the paper a lot. My name was in the paper a lot. And the only reason I tell you that is because that's the only thing I cared about, and it was my whole identity. Because other than that, I was a 6'4", pimply, goofy, totally afraid of the world, totally afraid of girls type of kid, you know. So alcohol was absolutely a wonderful solution for me when I found it at 13, 14 years old. And I need to tell you, alcohol did for me early what I couldn't do for myself. It allowed me to operate as a teenager in a world which I didn't know what to do in, you know. And for a long time, that's the way I saw it. And in my mind, you know, if 2 beers is good, then more is better. And I just was off to the races almost from the beginning. I left in 1966. I got a scholarship to St. Louis University. At that time, it was in the same league with Cincinnati and Louisville and Memphis State. I mean, it was a big deal. And I was the first guy in first person in my family to go to college, much less go on a scholarship, right? Catholic boy getting to go to Catholic college and at a Division I level doesn't get any better than that, you know. I showed up there. You couldn't play as a freshman in those days, but I showed up to the first game of my sophomore year so drunk that the other players had to hide me on the end of the bench so they wouldn't throw me out of school. So this is like going down to the Carrier Dome, and on the end of the bench, one of the kids is loaded. I mean, drunk. Let me tell you about that day, because it's really important when I looked at that day. What happened that day? 2 things happened that day. I got out of class, and I was walking down the street, and the guy said, "Hey, you want to get a drink?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I always said, yeah. Because I always had a mind that said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go have a couple beers. You can come home, get a nap, get up, get a shower, go to the game, and Tim, you'll probably be the hero. You know, that's what my mind would say. I don't know anything about a physical allergy or a mental obsession, and I surely don't know anything about phenomenon of craving. I'll promise you that. And as you guys well know, I drank right up to game time. The other thing that happened that day, my feelings got hurt. Because the day before, the coach said who was going to start and who were the substitutes. I wasn't one of them, and my feelings were hurt. And when little Timmy's feelings got hurt, little Timmy loved to drink, you know. In fact, here's the way I've kind of looked to package this thing up in my life. And this is the phenomenon of self that is just chased me to this day. Because here's what happens to me. No matter if I'm on your team or I'm working with you or I'm in a relationship with you, sooner or later, I start noticing that I'm not getting the respect that a man of my stature should be getting. It is awful. I mean, it happens. It even happens in AA, by the way, Lily. I notice sometimes I'm not getting the respect the guy 22 and a half years sober should be getting. You know the good news about AA? Nobody gives a damn. And that was really good for me because you guys were real clear. You said, Tim, if you want what we have, then come on in, son. If it's all about you, then you might want to go to the next meeting or you might want to go to the bar. We really don't care. You know, and that was the good news. But those two things, the phenomenon of craving, were going to catch me time and time again. And this self-centeredness that I thought, what is that all about when I first showed up, was going to show up time and time again. And what I'll share with you is the basketball was the most important thing in my life. It was the only thing I would have told you I cared about. But that day, alcohol moved to the top spot. Because that day, it got ahead of the only thing that at that point in my life that I cared about. You know, we have an old boy down by our way. He talks about alcohol was his friend. It was his buddy. He'd throw it in the back seat. They drive around and have a great time. He said, and one day he woke up. He was in the back seat. Alcohol was driving, and it was taking him wherever it wanted to go. And what I need to tell you, from 18 years old on, alcohol would dictate on a daily basis what I did, who I did it with, and especially where I ended up, you know. Now, I didn't know that then, or I guess I could have been here maybe a whole lot sooner. But that was the truth as I look back on it, you know. And, you know, as you probably guessed, the basketball came to a screeching halt at the beginning of my junior year. And the sad part about that is I didn't even care, you know, because I had found something I thought much better. I had found a way of life that was exciting, and I just thought this is the way I want to feel. This is the way I want to operate. And I walked away from something that I had spent my whole life trying to obtain. You know, the only thing from a little kid that I ever wanted to do was play college basketball. You know, and I walked away from that so easily because of alcohol. And that was just going to be the beginning of walking away or getting taken away almost everything that I would ever care about in my life, you know. I kind of would have stayed around that campus as long as I could party, and I kind of wanted to keep the party going. That was my idea. Unfortunately, they won't let you stay in college forever. And, you know, he said I had enough credits to graduate, and so I had to move on. The problem with that, in 1970, they had a thing called the Vietnam War going on. And it wasn't going too good about that time. You know, 4 of my best buddies had already been brought back in body bags. And they also had a thing called the draft lottery, where they drew your birthday out of a hat. My draft lottery number was 6. Okay? So I'm going, right? Now, again, you know, I would have won, I'm sure, if I had a go. But the bottom line was I would rather keep the party going if I could. And there was only 2 ways at that time you could get deferred from the draft. You could get married. And I thought, man, that's awful drastic, you know. Or you could go to grad school. And that was it. You know, as soon as I heard that, I came up with a plan for my adult life. I don't know if any of you can go back to that point where you started making the plans, making the plans for your adult life. Well, here was the plan that came into my head, and I want you to listen to this because it's going to sound insane to some of you. Some of you are going to be right there with me because this is exactly the way the plan came into my head. I said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go take the test to get into law school. I'm going to pass that test. I'm going to get into law school. I'm going to graduate from law school. Then someday I'm going to run for Congress and someday President of the United States. I mean, it's a short trip from me from street drunk to President of the United States. That's the way I'm going, you know. Some of you are nodding. I know you're with me. And as you might guess, having been a daily drinker, not going to class for 4 years, I went and took that test. I got a terrible score on the LSAT, and the law school turned me down, you know. And now, as meager as it may sound to you guys, I'm thinking, boy, Tim, you better come up with a new plan because you're going to be overshooting them up pretty quick if you don't. And so I'm sitting there one day, what enters my mind, Tim, why don't you do this? Why don't you stop drinking? You've been a daily drinker now for 4.5 years. Why don't you stop drinking because you got the brains, study for that test, take that test again and get into law school. And you guys, I made that day. I'd been drinking every day for 4.5 years, and I stopped drinking that day. And I found this guy, a real smart guy down the hall, and I asked him to tutor me for this test. And for the next 5 weeks, I gave it the best God gave me. Didn't drink a drop. I had to get through the shakes. People were out partying. I'm in this room with this egghead studying for this law test, just hating it. But I had to do it. 5 weeks of the best God gave me. Came down to the day before the second test. I made a slight change to the plan. So, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to go out and have a couple beers so I can relax, come back, get a good night's sleep, take that test, pass that test, get in the law school, Congress, President of the United States. Same little plan, just one little upfront change, you know. I left for those 2 beers on a Friday afternoon. I didn't get back to that campus till the following Tuesday. Found out later on I rode around St. Louis on a city bus about a day and a half of what I know today is called a blackout, you know. I didn't know what a blackout was until I got to AA. I knew I had many times where I started somewhere, ended up somewhere else with a huge chunk of time gone, and never really thought a whole lot about it, actually. Now, again, about 2 in the morning, I was drunk, and I knew I wasn't going to take the test, so I went back to the dormitory and found a smart guy, and I'm really not proud of this, and I paid him $20 to go take the test for me. And unfortunately, in those days, you could do it pretty easily. He goes and takes the test for me. I go out and stay drunk for 3 days. I even forgot that he did it. About 3 weeks later, I got the results of the test this guy took in my name. Damn guy gets the highest score in the history of the law school. It was not funny then, I'll tell you. I remember opening the scores going, "You idiot!" I think 900 was perfect. And he gets 899. I had gotten 300 on the one I took, for God's sakes. So now I got 2 scores in the dean's office, 600 points apart, and I'm not that stupid. And I'm thinking I better get to them before they get to me, and I made an appointment to go see this guy, and I'll never forget it because I walk in. Of course, I did the only thing you could do, right? I started to lie, and I said, "Well, Dean, you're probably wondering about the difference in them 2 scores. I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. I let somebody else take the test. How did he do?" As if I didn't know, right? And the guy looked at me. And what I wanted to share with you is, I don't know why I remember this, but now I'm 23 years old. As I turned to leave that dean's office, what went through my mind was, "Tim, you know the deal, man. It's the booze. The booze took the basketball all your life. The booze took the law school all your life, because you should be doing both of them, and you know it, man." I don't know why that happened that day, because it sure didn't last very long, I walked out of there. There were 2 guys that I know. They said, "Hey, you want to get a drink?" And I said, "You bet." That was 1970. It was going to be 20 years through I get to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But here's what I can tell you. And I tripped back into Louisville, Kentucky, because I had nowhere else to go, living a complete lie. Because I had to go home, and I had to tell everybody, of course, I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. Until I got to AA, the only person who knew the truth about this whole thing was my mom, right? Thank God for moms. Mom had the secret, but the problem was so did I. So did I. So at 23 years old, I'm going to try to be a husband. I'm going to try to be a father. I'm going to try to be a worker, an employee. In alcohol and alcoholism, I've already taken from me the very things I would fight you over today. It took my sense of worth. It took my dignity. It took my whole integrity. It took that insides that we all want so much to be able to stand on. Now, I didn't know that then. I certainly didn't know that then, but I look back and I can tell you that's how quickly that happened. I came back, I took the draft physical. I flunked the draft physical on a congenital birth defect. Thought, man, that'd save me a lot of trouble, But anyway, I came back. And I came back to Louisville, and I got to teaching and coaching. Because I had a degree, and I had played ball, so that's all I knew to do. And the first job I got, they made me the dean of students in an all-boys Catholic high school. The dean of students, which meant they just put a drunk in charge of discipline at their school, right? And my job was to check the kids in every morning, and I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, and you'll understand why. One morning I was sitting there like many other mornings, hungover, man, big old tomato head, just trying to get to 9 o'clock. And this is back in the 70s, right, where all the kids were out in the parking lot hitting a few doobies to get ready for class, right? And I'm sitting there one morning hungover, and I look up, and this kid standing up over me. He had that long hair we had in the 70s, had that army jacket on, man. You could smell that reefer all over, and he was kind of floating over top of my desk like this. And all of a sudden, he looked down and went, "Hey, Mr. Highland, you're looking bad, dude." And I think I said something very profound. I don't remember, but, the reason I tell you that story about that kid that day, listen to this. This past July, that kid celebrated 29 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. How about that? He's a multimillionaire. He lives down in Destin, Florida, and he's a great member of AA. And, I went down there a couple of years ago to speak at a conference, and he met me at the airplane, and he had his kids with him. He said, "Hey, Coach," he always called me Coach. He said, "Look, I ain't never said anything to my kids about how I was. He said, I'll make a deal with you. You don't say anything about me, I won't say anything about you. You know, let me tell you something. One of my great joys in AA is, in my journey in AA, by the way, is God has given me a chance to almost make up and redo almost all those areas of my life where I fell down so badly. And one of those areas is in Alcoholics Anonymous. About 10 years ago, a lot of those boys I tried to teach and coach back in the 70s, guess where they're showing up? They're showing up right in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm getting to sponsor those guys. How about having 3 brothers all show up 90 days apart that you taught and coached in the 70s? And you get to sponsor those kids and bring them into Alcoholics Anonymous. See, it doesn't get any better than that, you know. That ties life together in a special way. And that's been my journey. You know, God somehow always lets me know that, Tim, what you lost and what you threw away, there's always going to be a chance to put it back into place, you know. Also, when I came home, I got married to my high school sweetheart. Now, keep in mind, we dated off and on. I was in St. Louis. She was in Louisville. I came home in all my shame, living with my mom and dad, and I noticed very quickly that she had a car and she had an apartment. I didn't have either. I came home in August. We got married in November. You know? We got married in 1970, you know, high school sweethearts. We got divorced for the first time in 1983. But we got remarried in 1985, but we got divorced again in 1987. But we got remarried in 1990 when I got sober. Oh, too quick. Too quick. But we got divorced again in 1995 when I was 5 years old. Too quick. Now, what's that all about? We have a lot of Al-Anons here, and I think you know the answer to that story. It's all about alcohol and alcoholism and everything that goes with it. I love him, I hate him, I hate him, I love him. He's good, he's bad, he's bad, he's good. You know, I know today, if you don't know, there's a thing called alcoholism in the middle of any relationship. Pretty much an impossible deal. And what you had there were 2 people that actually cared for each other, had no idea, drunk and sober, what they were dealing with. And I can honestly tell you that today. Obviously didn't know that then. So I have a deep respect, by the way, for Al-Anon. Deep, deep respect for the family disease of alcoholism. You know, and I think you'll understand that as I go on with my story, you know. Also in that marriage, though, we had 3 beautiful children. How about as a father having your oldest son born on Christmas morning? And that was God's gift to us in 1971, 9 a.m. And the deal was I was supposed to be in the delivery room for that magic moment. And the best I could do that morning, I was in the hospital, but I was in the men's room with my head in the toilet bowl spitting up whiskey. And all I could think about is I got to get out of here, man, and I got to have a drink, you know. I missed the gift of that child that morning, and I need to tell you very sadly, I missed that kid growing up. Because by the time I got sober in 1990, that Christmas baby of mine was getting ready to go off to college, and I had not been part of his life. Had not been part of his life. And he and I had a real strained relationship, you know. But I'm 6 months sober in AA. And he says to me, Dad, can I talk to you before I leave for school? And I immediately started thinking, yeah, okay. He probably wants to tell me how proud he is of me that I'm 6 months sober. I'm sure that's it. And we have our little meeting. I said, son, what did you like to say? He said, Dad, I only have one thing to say to you. And I said, yeah, what's that? He said, Dad, I hate you. He said, I hate you, Dad, and let me tell you why. He said, I hate you because all you think about is you. Even since you stopped drinking, Dad, all you think about is you. Bye. Man, I mean, I was crushed. 6 months sober and taking a hit like this, I made an awful mistake. I took my story out to a bunch of old-timers in AA. They were not kind. First guy says to me, Tim, you drank, you're 6 months sober and you drank for 27 years and you think you're getting your identity back or your credibility back in 6 months? It ain't going to happen. And then they said something I'll never forget, still don't like to hear. They said, Tim, here's how you'll get your credibility back in AA. You will get it back, but you're only going to get it back one day at a time by not drinking and doing the next right thing. You know, that doesn't even sound good to me now, you know. You know. And if you're new, I know that doesn't sound good to you because when I showed up, I was, hey, everybody, let's call it even. And nobody was interested in even. You know why? It wasn't even. It's still not even. it will never be even. I finally understood that my job as a sober person is to continue to add to the lives of the people I've been around, the lives of the people I hurt, to the day they throw dirt in my face, you know. And it's really, really good to know that, you know. You know, I did the teaching and coaching thing for a while to the best of my ability, and I really regret that time because it's something I wanted to do, but I just couldn't do it. You know, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't show up. I couldn't be there in body, mind, and spirit. So I started to notice in the late 70s that I wasn't getting the type of respect that a man of my stature should be getting. So I left teaching, and I did what every drunk does sooner or later. I started my own business, you know. We got to do that sooner or later. And in 1980, I started my own insurance business. Now, let me talk to you about the decade of the 80s. You know, I got sober April 12th of 1990. It was not a good decade for me. Already told you, got divorced for the first time in 83, remarried in 85, divorced again in 87, remarried in 90. I was engaged to 2 other women in between time. I was in the nut house 5 different times. I was in 5 major car accidents. I lived 14 different places. I got shot at twice. I got stabbed with a beer bottle, and I lost $250,000. And I was thinking, this is going okay. You know, we're always kind of like the last to know, man, you know. We're the last to know. You know, 1982 to 1985, I went through 5 psychiatrists. That was a real simple program. I kept them until they started talking about alcohol. They started talking about alcohol, fired them, got me a new guy, you know. I was drinking, taking every antidepressant they ever made, drinking whiskey and beer on a daily basis. If you're using that recipe, it did not work real great for me, you know. I used to run into guys, I was living with my mom and dad, I used to run into guys I went to high school with. They said, hey, man, what are you doing? I said, president of my own company. They say, no, kid, man, where you living? I said, mom and dad. 1985, New Year's Eve, living with mom and dad. Couldn't live drunk, couldn't live sober. The thrill was gone. That song always comes to my mind about that day. Because that day, no matter how much whiskey I drank, and if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. I knew the deal was over. My friend alcohol that I had found when I was a teenager had left me, and it no longer worked the way it worked. And I was really sad about that, and I knew it wasn't going to work. And when you can't live with it and you can't live without it, we get to a thing called hopelessness. And that was my first visit to the asylum. My brother Tommy took me up to our little place we have up on the hill called Our Lady of Peace. And I want to tell you this story because this is me. My alcoholism in a bucket is right here. I get up to this nut house, and I want to kill myself. I'm as suicidal as I've ever been, but I don't know what to do with me. And they send me to this little room back in the back, and this nurse comes down and sits next to me as I remember it. Someday I'm going to find her and get her side of the story. But what I heard her say was, well, honey, tell me about it. And I said, okay, I will tell you about it. Well, 2 years ago, my first wife threw me out for no reason that I can think of. And then I got engaged to this other woman, and she took off the ring, and I haven't even paid for it, you know, God. And then I tell you that my daddy went to prison when I was 12, and, you know, I'm just going on and on. And the more I talked, the better I felt. Looked at the nurse after a while, she didn't look so good. But maybe I'm there an hour, hour and a half, and I came in completely suicidal. She looks me in the eye, and she says, well, honey, you certainly have a right to feel the way you do. I thought, God, lady, you're so right, man. If people messed over you like they messed over me, by God, you drink too. You know, I hadn't been there 2 hours, and I was cured. You know, I spent the next 28 days in a hospital trying to help everybody else. I swear. They made me head of the stress class. You know, I got a blue ribbon for the best ceramic in the shop deal. I mean, it was great. I mean, I just thought, because, see, I had momentarily forgot it wasn't me. It was you guys, and if you guys would do right, then I wouldn't drink the way I drank. You know, pressure was off almost immediately. You want to know how nuts it was? Halfway through the stay in the nut house, I'm walking down the hall one day, and the nurse says, would you like a pass out tonight? I must have thought she said, you want to pass out tonight? I said, what? She said, yeah, as long as you can go out for a couple hours as long as you're back by curfew. I said, oh, God, thanks. Call my best buddy. He picks me up to the nut house. We go right to the watering hole, man. Slam down 6, 8 beers, get a couple shots. You know, I bought this big old bottle of wine, telling about all the people I'm helping back to the hospital. You know, we just got tore up. You know, it's 11:15. I said, I got curfew to the nut house. You got to get me back. So we pile in the car. We go back to this place, and I'm getting out the passenger side to stumble back in there, and I look back at him. He's just got tears all coming down his. I said, what is wrong with you? He said, Tim, you don't belong in there. I do. And I think I said, you know what? I think you're right. And when I get out of here, I will help you. You know, that's 1985. You know what? I came out of there and I did what I always did. I started over. Got me a new girlfriend, got me a new place to live. I got me a new business partner. I was always starting over. If you listen to our stories in AA, we're the best starter overs in the world. Don't finish much of anything, baby, but we can flat start over. Came out of there, I got back with my most frequent wife, as I call her, and we bought a new house, we moved, we did the whole deal that you try to do, and you know, as you've often heard, wherever you go, there you are. And the drunk was still right in the middle of the deal, and late 1989, she threw me out again, and I ended up living my last 6 months of my drinking, living in a guy's basement in the south end of Louisville. And I can't tell you anything miraculous happened there, okay? You know, I was like now as the president of my own company, living in a basement. I thought that was a step up from mom and dad's, I guess. And but anyway, April 12th of 1990, I woke up in that basement. And the night before, I'd sit there and drink 3 or 4 beers all by myself. Nobody else was around. And I woke up the next morning. And I didn't know it was going to be any different than any other mornings. And I went into my office. And you guys, I'm in a business that's really busy. I mean, the phone rings constantly. People are in and out of my office constantly. April 12th, 1990, I sat down at 7:45 in the morning. I did not move a muscle till noon. The phone never rang one time that day. And nobody came in the office that day. And I had that sense that the book talks about. I don't know if it's a moment of clarity, but I did have a sense of, it's over, Tim, and you know what the deal is. And I reached in my desk drawer, and there was a meeting directory of Alcoholics Anonymous, which a guy had given me 2.5 years before, you know. And that was a Thursday, and that was my first day in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and what I'll tell you, from that day until this morning, the last 22.5 years, in a general way, I have laughed harder than I ever thought a guy like me could laugh. But I've also cried more tears than I thought a man like me would ever cry. I have felt grief and sadness like I'd never feared I could stand right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason I say that, I was like a lot of us, I guess, when I showed up, I hoped the sobriety thing was going to be about the absence of problems in my life. And you guys said, oh no. Tim, nobody ever said that. Tim, here's what it's going to be about. You're going to get to live life and everything that goes with it, and you're going to get to be part of it, Tim, in body, in mind, and in spirit. And when they said that, a bell went off in me, because back in the day, my wife would say to me, Tim, you're not even here when you're here. I say, what do you mean I'm here? She said, no, you're not. And if you read our book, my disease is all comprehensive. I wasn't drinking 24/7, but here was the deal. I was either drinking, I was thinking about drinking, or I was thinking about me. And that doesn't leave any space or any room for anybody else. Alcoholism is an all-inclusive disease. And what I mean by that is I never understood the two facets. I mean, when I wasn't drunk, this whole obsession with me and obsession with the drink totally prevented me. Because you know what? If you can only bring your body and you can't bring your mind and you can't bring your spirit, you can't be a husband, you can't be a dad, you can't be a granddad, you can't be that stuff. And the reason I know that, I have 8 grandkids today. About 3 weeks ago, I sat down with the 11-year-olds. There's 3 of them. We played Monopoly, sitting on the floor for 3 hours. And a guy like me didn't give 3 hours of his time, couldn't stay still for 3 hours for anybody, anytime. And I can be present for those little grandkids today in a special way. And those of you who have been around know what I mean. The joy, the gift of being present in our lives, not just having our bodies there. And today, when I'm present fully, I feel like a father. I feel like a grandfather. You know, I feel like a friend because I can listen to people. And I say that and I thank you for that gift. I had no idea what I was missing. You know, when I showed up into the rooms of AA, I want to tell you this if you're new, I did not do it right. For 14 months, I didn't have a sponsor, didn't have a home group, so I certainly hadn't done a step. And if you'd have ran into me at 14 months, dry in the bone, and you'd said, hey, Tim, how are you doing, buddy? Are you happy, joyous, and free? I'd said, yeah, you idiot, what's your problem? I mean, 14 months, I'm about ready to lose it all because I'm hanging on. I'm doing an audit on Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to make sure I don't get too close to anybody. But I'm dying. And I finally met a little guy in AA who became my first sponsor. And I couldn't sleep at night. And he would say, Tim, just remember, God is love. God is love. God is love. And every night I'd go to bed going, God is love. God is love. God is love. And sometimes I still do that. But 14 months drier than a bone, God is love was not getting it done. And I thought if I call that little sucker and he gives me it to one more time, I'm going to bust him. I'm going to run him down and punch him. And sure enough, I called him with the issue of the day. And sure enough, he said, Tim, just remember, God is love. I said, damn it. I know that. But I am so angry. And I'm so depressed. And he said, good. Good, 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 good. I said, what do you mean good? He said, Tim, listen to this. He said, in Alcoholics Anonymous, God is love, but love is action. God is love, steps 1, 2, and 3, your powerlessness, his power. Steps 4 through 9 is your simple responsibility to clean up your mess. Step 10 is a refresher course every day. Step 11 hooks you up with your God. And step 12 hooks you up with us. What do you say, buddy? And I said, yes, sir, I have got to do something because I cannot live in my skin any longer without drinking or blowing my brains out. And that was the day he sent me to Lambton Baptist Church, and I became the coffee maker there on Wednesday mornings. And that was the day he put me in a big book group of Alcoholics Anonymous that's in Wednesday nights. It's in my office even to this day. And I did the 12 steps. And you know what happened to me that day? I know a lot of you do. What happened to me that day is the biggest secret in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the biggest secret in Alcoholics Anonymous, I found out where the fun is. The fun is in the middle. The fun is in the middle of this thing, man. The fun is in the middle of people putting conferences on like this. The fun is in the middle with people getting their coffee grinds all over them. The fun is getting nasty, dirty, physical in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and I say that because, you know, I have not gotten out of the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous since that day, and I have no plans to. So if you're out there on the edges like I was and you're miserable, you are going to be miserable till you come into the middle where the people that are engaged and are having fun with this are, and you'll never, ever, ever want to leave, you know. You know, when I showed up here, as you heard, I owed $250,000 to people who really wanted it back. They really did, and that really bothered me. I thought that was not nice of them, and it really bothered me my first year trying to get sober, and it was miserable my first year, you know. And of course, like any drunk, I'm trying to come up with one idea to come up with $250,000 all at one time, right? So I'd go into my office in the morning, I'd start shifting papers back and forth. By 10 o'clock, that fear would be so great, it would shut me down. By 10:30, I'd be back in my apartment, crawl up in a ball. Now, this happened about 3 out of 5 days a week. And I'm thinking, man, something's got to give here. Something's got to give. I'm at a meeting one night, and I'm whining about my business. I'm whining about I'm going bankrupt. And I'm sitting next to this old fudgety codger, and he said, what are you bitching about? And I said, he said, see me after the meeting. So I see this guy after the meeting. He says, tell me about your business. I said, all right. Well, it opens at 8 o'clock. He said, good, Tim. You be there at 8 o'clock, Tim. Tim, not 8:05, not 8:10. You be there at 8 o'clock. What's next? I said, well, I'll go on sales calls. He said, good, Tim, go on your sales calls. What's next? I said, well, I'll go to lunch. He said, Tim, go to lunch. And Tim, come back from lunch. I thought, that's a good point. What's next? I said, well, I'll come back in and I do my paperwork. He said, good, do your paperwork. What's next? I said, well, work's over at 4:45. He said, good, go home, have dinner with your family, go to your meeting, come home, say your prayers. And then he slammed me with a big one. He said, and Tim, do the same thing the next day. I'm like, wow, what a concept. I mean, you like do that every day? And what that old guy was telling me, my sponsor's since given it a name. He was telling me, Tim, your job is to do the stitches and leave the patterns up to God. Tim, you just do the stitches and leave the patterns up to God. And the bottom line is, you guys, that sounds good, doesn't it? But the problem is when I start stitching, I start thinking, my God, what is this, a hat, a shirt, a pants? And when's it going to be done? They said, oh, no, you just stitch. You just stitch, and we promise you the patterns that God comes up with will be far greater than you would ever imagine. Let me tell you a story. And so I did that, right? And I didn't do it happily. I'm getting there at 8 o'clock. I'm going sales calls. I'm going to lunch. I'm coming back from lunch, and I'm doing it. And I'm not getting anywhere. I checked my bank account, 6 months into this. I still owe $249,797. I mean, But I'm doing it because I don't really have any other choice, all right? Let me tell you a story. 5 years later, I come in from my home group, which is in the morning. There's 5 phone messages there. 4 of them are from AA guys, and the last one was from a reporter at a business paper in Louisville. So I called this lady up, and she said, Mr. Highland, we would like to do an article on your business. It's one of the fastest growing of its kind in the Louisville area. I said, well, great, that's really nice. That would be super. So I said, what is it you'd like to know? She said, sir, what is it that you did that really turned your business around? I tell you what, I got 2 things going on in my head. I got this one story. I came up with this incredible idea, pulled this company up by its bootstraps and rocketed it. But what I said to her was, here's the truth, lady. My office opens at 8 o'clock. I get here at 8 o'clock. And I went right through the whole thing. And when I'm done, there's like silence on the other end of the phone. And she goes, thank you, sir. We'll see what we can do. And you know what? I knew there wasn't going to be an article. But I also knew something, that what I told her was the truth. My only job today, in my spiritual life, in my AA life, in my business life, my personal life, is ask God for the divine inspiration each day. And what is the next stitch? And you know the problem with the stitches with a guy like me? Stitches are little, they're small. And I'm a big deal guy. I love big deals. I want the whole $250,000 right now. But you know what I can promise you? When I'm stitching and I'm not worried about the patterns, it's the happiest I ever am. You know, I'll share with this, we laugh and joke in Alcoholics Anonymous about this whole relationship thing. And I will share with you, and a lot of you know this, getting divorced when you're drunk is one thing. Getting divorced in sobriety is a whole different game, right? And it's very painful and very embarrassing. And when I lost my marriage at 5 years sober, I was working hard in the program. I thought, I was doing the best I could. And I look back on it, it was a classic family afterward situation, I just transferred, my self-centeredness from the booze to other places. And so when I lost it at 5 years sober, and I came back to you guys, I said, what's the deal? And they said, Tim, we don't know, buddy. We don't know, but here's what we want you to do. Keep helping drunks. Stay on the firing line. We know if you'll do that, God will work this thing out, So I went on for a couple of years helping drunks, and, after 3 or 4 years helping drunks, you say, come on, there's got to be something else other than this, God. I'd kind of like to have a companion to help drunks with, if you don't mind. And so sure enough, I started looking around the rooms of AA, and pow, there she was, lady 5 years more sober than me, and I want to tell you, on paper, it looked like an AA match made in heaven. And sure enough, we did the mandatory 3 months dating, and we got married. Big AA wedding, and I need to tell you this, I thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and to her, I think we both did. It lasted 8 months. 8 months, and now I'm 10 years sober. Right in the middle of AA, giving talks just like this, helping bunches of guys. Now I'm on my knees asking God, what is wrong with me? What is so intrinsically broken in me that I can't have a relationship? And I came to you guys said, Tim, we don't know. We don't know, but we know if you'll keep helping drunks, if you'll stay on the firing line, buddy, it'll work out. And I did that. And I've always done that. And as I look back, it's the only thing that I've consistently done in the program is try to give back to other people what I've been given. So I went on, and that all settled out, and I lived with my dad for a while, and then I got my place back, and then something happened very crazy on my way to long-term celibacy in Alcoholics Anonymous. About 2000, a couple of years after that, my most frequent wife, mother of my children, called me and said, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, nothing. She said, I'm taking the kids to South Carolina on vacation, the grandkids. Would you like to come down? I said, well, yeah, I got nothing going. So I went down there, and they had a place, and I went down and got my own place. And keep in mind, we've been divorced at this time about 6 years from the last time. And we've known each other since we were 17 years old. Married and divorced 3 times. And let me tell you, something interesting happens on the trip. We became friends for the first time on that thing. We worked at being friends. We became parents and co-parents for the first time. We became grandparents and co-grandparents. And something had changed. Whatever those walls were, I can't tell you what it was. There was a fluidity now to our conversations. And whatever all that stuff had been that was so we couldn't get over the mountain, there just seemed to be something different. So we came back to Louisville and kind of worked on that friendship for a while, And then after a while, I said, hey, you want to date? So we started to date. Once a week we'd go out on a date because we never dated before. And eventually I sold my place and then moved into her place. In just about November of 2002, I was sitting there one day, I looked at her and she looked at me and I said, well, what do you think? This past November 28th was our 42nd gross wedding anniversary. Oh, man. You know, I said to my sponsor one time, is this pretty crazy? He goes, well, yeah. But then he said, Tim, maybe not. He said this. He said, you know, Tim, if our program is about anything, it's about transformation. And you know the thing about transformation? We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to look. And we don't know who's going to be involved. You know why? Because God transforms. We don't. If you read our steps, we don't do any transformation. We plant the seed. We water it. God grows the plant. And somewhere along the line, it took what it took. It took all the weeds in that relationship. It took the heartache. It took the despair. It took the frustration and the desperation of the years to bring us to a point where somehow there was a transformation. Because I need to tell you, she's my best friend today. I need to tell you, we are having a great time. We are great parents. We're living a great life today. You know, I'll tell you, we went to our 40th high school reunion a couple years ago. And we walk in, everybody goes, oh, look, they're still together. I just couldn't tell them the truth. I really couldn't. But let me tell you why it's so important. You know, I'm so grateful for this, that we got to this point. About 2 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with a real different form of cancer called choroidal melanoma. She had a tumor on her eye, and they took it off. And now she lives in a daily jeopardy that it can show up in her lungs or her liver on any day. It's in her bloodstream. And we live with that every day, you know. It's not fun. But, you know, here's the good news. The good news is today, we love each other, and I can be there for her. The good news is today, we know how to live one day at a time. We know that's all we got is today. And we know that there's a God out there who could get us back together, certainly could take care of something as simple and easy as cancer. You know, I mean that because we live in hope and we live in faith. And that was something I never even understood, even though I grew up in the church. And I never understood that like I understand it today, and I'm very grateful for that. You know, I'll share this with you. A bunch of people said, boy, you were terrible in relationships. I said, yeah, I know. I said, I had no skills for living. And I was about 2 or 3 years sober. Me and 2 other geniuses, 2 years sober. We got talking one day about, and they said, Tim, your problem is communications. You don't know what to say to people. So we started working on it. That's bad. You got 3 little drunks trying to work on communications. So the first guy says, Tim, here's what you need to tell people when you know, tell them, how can I help? When people say something to you, say, well, how can I help? How can I help? You pass the ball to them. So I started it. How can you help? How can I help? How can I help? I'm doing it at work. I'm doing it at home. Didn't take me long. I found people who didn't want my help. I said, what do you say? People don't want your help. They said, Tim, well, just tell them, I'm sorry you feel that way. So I got, how can you help? I am sorry you feel that way. And the last genius says, Tim, you need to validate people. Tell them that they may be right. So now I have got it going, you guys. Hey, how can I help? Sorry you feel that way. Hey, you might be right. And I am using it at work. I am using it at home. And like any drunk, I am killing it to death, right? I come in for my Tuesday men's meeting one night back home, and I'm just spiritually up there, you know. I just kind of fly into the house on my wings, you know, kind of into the kitchen, and all hell's breaking loose in that house. My wife's yelling at my daughter's yelling at my son. They're all screaming at each other. I'm sitting there in my kitchen chair ready to do my thing. About that time, my wife comes in and says, and don't give me that how can you help shit. Of course, I said, honey, I'm sorry you feel that way. And she said, you asshole. I said, yep, you might be right. Oh, man. You wonder why I had trouble in marriages, huh? And here's the deal. I usually have 2 young guys come up afterwards and go, hey, man, what were those 3 things? You know, if you use them, you're on your own. You know, I had three beautiful children in in that marriage, I had those 2 sons, my Christmas baby and another son, and then I had my baby girl. My little girl was her daddy's daughter from the get-go. As a toddler, her first little phrase was, "I'll do it myself." Her second little phrase was, "You're not the boss to me." So we knew from the get-go that she was the one, and sure enough, boy, about 12 years old, game was on. I was finding 6-packs in her backpack. I'm finding half pints in her shoes in her closet. She's getting locked up for, stealing. She is on. The game is on, right? I'm chasing her around the streets of Louisville while she's a teenager. She's got her daddy's disease, and she's got it bad. And a very beautiful child, by the way. Tall, blonde, blue-eyed, gifted artist, a gifted athlete, but well into the disease of alcoholism by the time she was 15. About 12, 14 years ago, she left Louisville and got a scholarship to Chicago Art Institute, for her art. And she went up there, and I knew what was going on. I mean, she was well into the disease. She left Chicago, and she went on a run to L.A. And I knew she was living in Los Angeles in her car in the streets of Los Angeles. I knew that. About 10 and a half years ago, she came home to Louisville, and we hadn't seen her in about 2 years. And let me tell you what I saw. I saw this beautiful, beautiful child. Her eyes were all caved into her head. Her cheeks were collapsed. Her teeth were rotten out. She was so thin you could count her ribs. Because in addition to her alcoholism, she had the disease of anorexia. She was living only on a liquid diet, living in that car. And her body was starting to consume itself, if you know anything about that disease. And she came home and she stood in front of me and I said, "Honey, is there anything that we can do to help you?" And she said something I've heard so many times. She said, "Dad, I'm fine. I'm fine." And she turned and she left and she went back to Los Angeles. And I tell you what, guys, I knew it was just going to be a matter of time before that phone was going to ring, because I knew it was going to ring. And about 5 weeks later, the phone rang one day, and the good news, it was her. The bad news is I could tell by her voice that she was absolutely on her last leg, that she was dying in that car in the streets of Los Angeles. And she asked me, "Daddy, what can I do?" Now, here's what I want to tell you. I'm 12 years sober at AA at this time. And I work with a lot of people, and I help a lot of people, and I usually don't have any trouble telling anybody when they call me what we're going to do in the program of recovery of AA. But all of a sudden, if it's your baby girl, and she's 2,000 miles away, and you can't get to her, let me tell you what went on. I was asking myself, "Hey, Tim, what do you think about the old A&A now, buddy? Good enough for her? What about those 12 steps, big shot, you're always talking about? Is it good enough for your little baby? And what about the God of your understanding you're always mouthing off about? Is it good enough for your little girl?" And I need to tell you, there was a war going on in me like I had never had in my life, because every bone in me as a daddy wanted to get on an airplane and go out there and bring my baby home. But what came out of my mouth was, "Honey, here's a man's phone number in Alcoholics Anonymous in Los Angeles, and I pray and I hope you will make a call to him." But I tell you what, you all, I hung up that phone and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed, because I'm thinking it's only 50-50 that she'll make that call, or we'll go out there and bring her home in a box. But what I can also tell you, and the reason it was such an important point in my sobriety, what I did know at that time in my heart is that I had given her the only thing that I have to give anybody. Because the only thing, you guys, that I know that's worked for people like me and like you for the last 77 years on a consistent and persistent basis is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And just because it was my baby girl, I couldn't come up with anything different. It had to be that. And I knew that in my heart, and I was ready to accept the consequences, but I'm very, very happy to share with you this past July, her mom and I did get on an airplane to go to Los Angeles to help her celebrate her 10-year anniversary in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll just finish with this, and I didn't think about this till lately, and the reason I'm going to mention this, some of you may have encountered this man along the way, and I think this is what I'd like to leave you with as you go home and you go back to your home group. The phone number that I gave her was a man named Scott Redmond. Scott was a Jewish man from New York who lived in California. A Jewish man from New York who lived in California, and I'm asking him to help a little drunken, dying Catholic girl in the streets of Los Angeles. Scott Redmond was 25 years sober. Scott Redmond lived all the way across Los Angeles from where my daughter was. And I can easily have understood when she called, he would have said, honey, I can't get there tonight. I'll send somebody else. I'll send a woman. Or, honey, how about meeting me in the morning? But he didn't do that. He got in his car and he fought his way across traffic in Los Angeles, because I need to tell you, if he doesn't do that, then I got a different story to tell you, right? And that's the only deal. We've been given a great gift. I've been given a great gift. And the only thing they ask of us is anytime, anywhere, somebody reaches out, that our hand is always there. And let me say this. I've learned this, and I was telling this to Elizabeth. Sometimes it's not comfortable responding to God's commands in Alcoholics Anonymous. What I have learned, I stay comfortably uncomfortable in AA. Because if I get comfortable, watch out, because that means I'm following my own will. And I'm glad that night that Scott Redmond got uncomfortable enough to get up out of his seat at his home, drive all the way across Los Angeles to be there as a member of AA for my daughter. And as many of you know, Scott passed away about 2 years ago with pancreatic cancer. And I'll be forever grateful to that man and this program that he acted, as we all ask each of us as we go back to our home groups, as I go back to Louisville, because you know what? There's going to be somebody else's kid, somebody else's grandkid, and someday you're going to get the call, and I'm going to get the call, and I hope I don't go, well, after the ball game, or after my favorite TV show, or I'll get somebody else to go because it's too far. I hope I'm able to say, God, you called me, and it's my time to respond and to give back what's been so freely given to me. I love you guys. God bless. Have a safe trip home.